When I began reading about Gurdjieff's ideas about mindfulness in everyday life and the kind of spiritual development that could result from that sort of foundation, one of his ideas especially intrigued me, and that was what he called three-brained beings. That in addition to our intellectual brain, our talking brain, our verbal, that kind of logic brain, we also had an emotional brain and a body instinctive brain. But there was a problem, Gurdjieff claimed, and that is that while ideally all three of these brains would be developed and educated, in point of fact, in almost all cases, one of them would be highly developed and the other two would be left either just plain dumb or dumb and neurotic. Well, the truth of that hit me immediately, because I realized that as an academic intellectual, my verbal brain, my talking brain, was extremely well developed, but emotionally or body instinctively, I don't think I even came up to normal for the culture on those. I was kind of neurotic. I wasn't in good contact with my body. I was missing out on that. Now, what he meant by brain was that each of these three systems took in information about the world, evaluated it according to its own kind of logic and knowledge and goals, and then reached a decision. But if only one of these brains was functioning, you simply didn't get very good advice on what to do in the world. You didn't have three wise opinions representing different slants, as it were, to choose from. Well, when I think back to the kind of mainstream education I got in graduate school, it was wonderful intellectual education. It increased my talk power, my thinking power, and gave me intellectual knowledge to an enormous degree, but it did nothing at all for the emotional or body instinctive part of me. Those things I had to learn the hard way through a lot of suffering to goad me into learning to become more emotionally sensitive, to develop the intelligence of my body, and it took a long time. I had to go to encounter groups and various kinds of therapy activities to begin to bring my emotional intelligence up to a reasonable, normal level. And I had to learn Aikido to begin to learn about the intelligence of the body. There's a whole new way of taking stuff in. If only there'd been a graduate school that educated all of me. Well, that's what excites me about ITP, the Institute for Transpersonal Psychology. It was founded in 1975, the same year that my Transpersonal Psychology's book came out, actually. Whether that's a coincidence or meaningful, I don't know. And it was founded by three friends of mine, Bob Frazier, who was also a black belt in Aikido, Jim Fadiman, one of the cleverest psychologists I know, and Arthur Hastings, another extremely clever psychologist, even though his formal training was in rhetoric. And the idea of ITP, when it was founded back in 1975, was to train all three of these aspects of a human being, to try to train emotional intelligence and body instinctive intelligence as well as verbal intelligence. What an idea. Totally different. That's still the basis of ITP's graduate program today, although they've added other areas like creativity and social skills and the like. And that kind of fits in with the fact that even mainstream psychology has begun to recognize that there are different kinds of intelligence. It's not all a matter of verbal skills. There are motor skills, there are spatial visualizing skills, and creativity kinds of skills and the like. So I want to say a few good words about ITP. When I retired from the University of California at Davis, I started teaching half-time at ITP, and I still do today. And I try to think of myself as semi-retired, although I think it's a delusion since I'm busier than ever. But I teach a course in mindfulness each fall where I teach classical meditation techniques as well as Gurdjieff's idea of mindfulness in life. And I teach a course on either altered states of consciousness or parapsychology in the spring. The students at ITP are really exciting. We have a lot of younger students now, which we didn't have before, because we've started to offer a program in clinical psychology that leads to APA approval, and that's a nice career track for some people. But we try to put a transpersonal approach to that rather than the totally materialistic kind of thing people get in standard graduate schools. But the students who really excite me are the older students who already have a career usually, but have begun to think, is this all there is to life? Success in the conventional stuff? What about my spiritual development? What about that transpersonal, that stuff that goes beyond body, social representation, ego, the status? What about that whole spiritual side of things, the beyond the personal? And so besides the courses I teach, which are electives not required, our students are required to take some Aikido or Tai Chi, for instance, to begin to educate their body intelligence. They take courses in creativity, as well as more conventional sorts of things like writing skills, research methods, all that sort of thing. And they come to be transpersonal scholars in our Transpersonal Psychology PhD program, particularly the one I'm most concerned with, even though ITP has several other programs. What does that mean to be a transpersonal psychology? It doesn't mean you're going to get a job offer from Harvard to do something conventional. It means you're going to follow your heart, your real interest in spirituality, and find different sorts of ways of making a living: consulting, writing, workshops, lecturing, teaching, and so forth, but not the mainstream sort of thing. I'd like to say that the mainstream is now so enlightened that spirituality is recognized as a vital part of human development. But the truth is that a kind of materialism still dominates almost all mainstream institutions. Spirituality, well, there are theology schools for that sort of thing, for people who believe that stuff, but everybody knows the world is just material. At any rate, ITP is really exciting because the whole person is being trained. Not everything, of course. We're young. We don't know that much, but we're working on it. In fact, let me elaborate on we don't know that much. We draw a lot from the world's various spiritual traditions, trying to pull out the essence from the things that are just cultural sorts of manifestations. But when new students come in the fall, they usually take my mindfulness class, and I greet them the first day and welcome them to ITP and tell them you've come to a place where you're going to learn about stuff that is really vital to your whole psychological self, and particularly the spiritual part of it. And incidentally, half of what we teach you is nonsense, and unfortunately we, the faculty, don't know which half. But the positive side is that when you do your dissertation research, you're going to get to contribute to sorting out the nonsense from what's really real in the spiritual and transpersonal sort of realm, what can really work in our times. And that's exciting. It's also exciting because in a lot of conventional fields, the basic research has been done, and the kind of dissertation research students do is to prove they know how to do it, but it's not a real contribution. It's not opening up new areas. But so many of our students open up new areas in transpersonal psychology and ask questions that haven't been asked before and begin to get a look at what the answers are. In one of the appendices to the End of Materialism book, for instance, I talk a little bit about ITP, and I list the titles of some of the more exciting students' dissertations, and actually practically all of them were exciting when I looked them up, but I had to keep it down to a small number, and wow, it's something. So if you're interested in a graduate degree that educates your whole self, not just your talk power, think about ITP. It excites me.